Hey everybody, welcome back to Coco and Daltz. We're real people bringing you real reviews of all the latest streaming offerings on Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, and HBO Max. I'm not Daltz.
And I'm not Coco.
And not Coco, what are we reviewing for the people this week?
This one is called Crime Scene, The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel.
Or if you're British, the Cecil Hotel.
You stole my joke.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you want to start over? I'll totally let you have it.
No, I don't
Okay.
actually. Because it's always more charming when you do it. It's more obvious when I do it. So this is a 4-part Netflix docu-series based on a true story. Well, it's actually a docu-series, so it is a true story, of a young Canadian tourist who goes to LA, which is where the Cecil Hotel is, and disappears. And they try to figure out where she went and how. And what ends up being the case in this particular instance is she. So they think that maybe she was kidnapped
because the hotel is like on Skid Row, which is not the world's safest place,
right?
Especially for like 21-year-old girls.
And there's a lot of urban legend around it in terms of serial killers who stayed there, apparently.
Yeah, the Night Stalker stayed there.
Yeah, and there's a lot of funny business in terms of, was it haunted? Mm-hmm. And like Coco said, it's in a nasty neighborhood, so there's some bad vibe, mojo, juju going on around there. So it's just all around a bad scene. So they're trying to figure out what happened to this poor young woman. And it takes 4 episodes, and they're almost an hour each, right? They're 54, 58 in that range, minutes long. And we explore all the avenues. And during the exploration of these many avenues, we bring in many non-experts from across the internet who have absolutely no credentials whatsoever to be talking about this particular case.
Right, not cops, not investigators, no sort of law enforcement credentials, just me sitting at my computer hearing about this case and being like, oh, I wonder what happened to that girl, and then turning into an internet sleuth.
Like, they do have some of the detectives involved, so they do have some legitimacy there, but it's not, by any stretch of the imagination, the larger contributors to this particular series. And also, one of the guys who is mentioned is also described as a YouTuber. That's his credential. It says, his name, and underneath it says YouTuber.
Well, if we were interviewed as internet sleuth experts or something, we'd be like podcaster.
And that's true. I just like to be a tuber.
A tuber.
Like a potato.
Because then I might want to eat you all the time, because I'd be like, potato. Oh.
Chop me up and fry me and call me French fries. Or actually, I'd be Canadian fries. But other than that, so I digress.
The dog is like, what are all these funny voices?
Right.
The dog has come to see us now.
So that's essentially the basic premise of this docu-series. 4 parts investigating the disappearance of Elisa Lam, the Canadian tourist in LA. Coco, what did I miss? Because you're so good at these summaries that... Well, we should actually give some background to the listener first, is that neither one of us wanted to do the summary for this because we both fell asleep during the watching of this show.
Right. We watched 2 episodes one day and then the last 2 episodes another day, and I fell asleep during the 2nd and 4th episodes. I basically fell asleep right when they said this is probably what happened to her. So that's why Daltz did the summary, because I'm like, I can figure out based on what I heard when I would wake up for my not-offs what happened. But Daltz actually read some spoilers, so Daltz actually knows.
So, and then there was at one point during the 4th episode, I believe, where we both fell asleep at the same time and conked heads.
I don't remember that, so I must have been really out.
No, I think I remember that happening. We were both leaning toward one another, and all of a sudden we're like, somebody's got to stay awake here.
So based on what we're saying about falling asleep during the 4-episode series, you can probably understand, you can probably figure out what I'm about to say, which is it did not need to be 4 episodes.
No.
I did read a couple things when it first came out, saying that it could have been 2. I think it could have been 3. I think
it could have been 1. I think it could have been...
Yeah, it could have been a movie.
It could have been an hour and a half long, in and out, done.
So the internet sleuths had nothing to do with it, but I admit I love a good conspiracy theory, and I did actually like there's some crazy like coincidences surrounding this. Like she apparently there was an outbreak of tuberculosis on Skid Row around the time she was there. The university she went to in Vancouver has like the world's foremost TB research center.
University of British Columbia.
Yeah, the test for TB is called the Lam ELISA, which is spelled the exact same way as Elisa Lam.
Yeah.
It's just
reversed.
Flipped. And I guess the company that owns the Cecil Hotel, their corporate address, if you Google Maps it, the pinpoint drops in the cemetery in Vancouver where Elisa Lam is buried.
Right.
So there's a lot of really crazy stuff like that, and that stuff really interested me, but just like a bunch of clips of random people on YouTube talking about, I don't believe the cops when they say it's an accident, like, give me a freaking break.
Well, and then these people like taking it upon themselves to try to solve the crime and going to the hotel and then filming themselves climbing on the fire escape and, going out the window and doing all these things is like, it's yes, sometimes authorities are not good at their jobs, but they're not intentionally trying to not solve the crime. Like what is their interests in doing this? Like, I mean, I know there are things that are cover-ups and when cops are involved in bad things, I understand. I'm not naive that way. But when it's a 21-year-old tourist from out of the country comes there and disappears, like what's the motive? And
apparently the TB conspiracy theory was that she was some kind of government agent who like released TB to Skid Row or something. Right. I mean, it was crazy. Right. So, yeah, so that's why I was like, not 4 episodes, maybe 3, because I really didn't mind the getting into like that kind of conspiracy theory or whatever, but you mentioned after the second episode that the pacing is very deliberate, and that is a very diplomatic way of putting it. It's very slow. It's very sort of plodding, and I understand this is a girl's life that was lost, and it's not entertainment. Like there's still kind of a mystery as to what really happened. There, people are like, this is our not best guess, but like based on all the evidence, this is the best stuff that, we're able to come up with. But yeah, I don't know. A crazy story like this, I think should have been more interesting. And instead, we were nodding off. We were passing out.
I mean, I think that there's respectful background and everything like that. You want to be, like I said, respectful and tactful and classy when it comes to somebody's murder and somebody's death. And the family was clearly distraught. They didn't have interviews with them, but they had footage of them when they came to LA. And you can imagine that, they looked like, I think from my understanding is that they were first generation Canadians. So they were, their daughter has gone to LA on this trip and they're all worried about that probably to begin with. And then she has some mental health issues.
Right.
And so there's some challenges there. Like you have to be respectful and all that. But at the same time, the pace was just way too deliberate, like you said, I said. And the other thing that I've noticed with a lot of these series where we say that is that they are presented in a very traditional TV way. So the first 5 minutes is almost like an overlap of the last 5 minutes of the previous episode, even though they do this, last week on episode 2 of crime scene, like they still do the synopsis at the beginning or the what happened in the previous episode. They still do that and you can skip that. But even though they do that in the episodes, they're still saying what happened. They're still catching you up. Whereas a lot of people binge watch these. So you don't need to be caught up on what just happened in something that you just stopped watching 3 minutes ago.
Right. This isn't like all the new stuff on Disney Plus that they're a-holes and they release one a week. So you're like, oh, I forgot what happened last week on WandaVision.
Yeah, like Mandalorian or whatever. Like they say, oh yeah, I need a little bit of a reminder because it was a week since I've seen it, or a week and 10 days, or whenever it is you watched it.
Right.
And so I find that that's kind of useless. Like you could pare those things down. And a lot of these shows too that we say this, there's a lot of redundant footage in these things. Like you're seeing the same thing over and over again. Like I just watched The Lady and the Dale, which is the documentary on HBO Max about the transgender woman who tried to get a car made and all that sort of stuff. I saw this photo of her and her family. I must have seen that 17 times. Same photo.
And that's what, like an 8-part series?
It's a 4-part series.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's the same kind of idea. It's like, okay, I get it. In that instance, there's only so many photos you can use, so I get that. But come on, let's just trim things back a little bit, people. Just because we want to have a 4-episode series doesn't mean we need to have a 4-episode series. And the other thing, and I'm dominating this conversation, so I apologize, but we have to figure out, like, this docuseries, it wasn't clear what it wanted to be. Was it a documentary on the hotel, which was cool because it's got a lot of these wacky, terrible, horrible things happening. Like, it seems like a real dodgy place. So that was interesting. That's what drew me into this. I thought it was going to be largely about the crazy things that happened at the hotel. Or is it a story about the vanishing of this particular woman? Or is it a story about the folly of internet sleuthing and conspiracy theories and all that sort of stuff? Or is it about the solving of a crime? Like, it just didn't really, there was no one particular place that it went, and that was confusing. I think if they picked one of those storylines and just stuck with it, I think this would have been a much more interesting viewing.
Yeah, definitely. And one of my criticisms, and this is just particular to me because I spent 7 years in the fitness industry. So Elisa Lam was bipolar. And there was a lot of evidence that she was not medicating as she should have been. The few days that she was at the Cecil Hotel, they actually had to relocate her to a different room because she was staying in a shared room, and the roommates were complaining about her behavior. And apparently she went to a taping of a TV show, which I hope was not Wheel of Fortune, and she caused a commotion there and got escorted off the premises.
Right.
And I can't remember who said it, but somebody said, maybe if, like, the hotel workers, they can see this woman is in distress. And if somebody had said, like, hey, are you okay? Do you need to, call your family, blah, blah, blah. Like, maybe that would have done something. And I'm like, you know what? Like, I worked in the fitness industry for 7 years. And if I personally knew a yoga studio member was having a health issue, I would ask them about it. Like, oh, hey, how did your procedure go? Are you okay? Do you feel okay? Do you need to... do we need to not do anything like on all fours in yoga today because, you have knee issues or whatever? Like, if I personally knew that person, I would inquire. But if it's just a member in a locker room who slipped and, twisted their ankle or something, like, we'll call the, medical authorities for that. But I mean, if I just see somebody like randomly walking around the locker room, talking to themselves or whatever, I'm not gonna go up to them.
Yeah, right.
Right. Like, and especially at a place like the Cecil Hotel where they were saying 911 would get called from that place like 3 or 4 times a day.
Right.
Like, the GM, they interviewed the lady who was the GM of the hotel at the time, and I loved her interviews, but she had her freaking hands full. So just, I hate to say it, but just like one girl coming into the lobby and being like, "Ooh, I'm crazy," like, they're going to be like, okay, just another nut job who, is staying here. And,
well, and she even said that. The GM even said that at one point. She's like, it's just something else that happened that day. Like, who knows what else? They've got drug overdoses, and they've got prostitutes, and they've got all sorts of things going on in that hotel.
Right.
And somebody walks through and they seem a little bit off. Yeah. Then that's probably, unfortunately, is the least of their concerns. And maybe there's, somebody with a gun, who shouldn't have it in their room or something like that.
Right. Like, if you ask somebody, like, are you okay? And they've got, this is LA, Skid Row, and they've got a gun. Like, well, now you've inserted yourself in a situation that's possibly dangerous. Right. You don't want to get involved in that. And, it's just... Yeah, so I was very nitpicky about that. But yeah, I loved the GM's interviews. So I could be wrong about this, but it seems like she didn't have like a hotel management background. It seemed like she was a corporate lady who came in
more business.
Yeah, when the hotel was sold and the new corporate ownership was gonna try to turn it around and make a profit. And yeah, it definitely seemed like she was in over her head a little bit with that place. Like, if somebody coming from like a hospitality background maybe might have, maybe the same thing would have happened, I don't know, but they might have been able to get like a better handle on things. But she just definitely seemed like, she kind of looks back on those years and, she's just like, whoa, what was that?
And I would wonder why she would take that job.
Right.
Like that's if you're going to manage a hotel for the first time, you're going to manage the most notorious hotel in LA.
Maybe they threw a ton of money at her, and
Yeah.
she after 10 years, she was just like, all right, I'm out. thanks for the money, but it's not worth me going to Skid Row every day.
Right.
And I didn't realize Skid Row was that big. I didn't realize it was a 56 square block area.
So what I also didn't know was it was an actual place. I thought it was just like a concept.
Oh.
You know what I mean? Like the down and out. Oh, it's Skid Row. Okay. I didn't realize it's actually incorporated. I mean, it's part of LA.
Yeah, I knew that. I think a company that we used to work for opened its LA downtown offices near Skid Row.
Oh,
but
okay.
they were saying at the time that maybe Skid Row was in the process of being cleaned up. But I don't speak to anybody who works in the LA office anymore, so I'm not sure.
I also know Skid Row as being a Canadian hair metal band starring Sebastian Bach, who has been on Trailer Park Boys. So see how it all comes back to either Canada or Trailer Park Boys.
And I have used Skid Row songs in spinning playlists because I used to teach spinning. So there you go.
It's all about Skid Row, actually.
That's right.
I have no idea why we didn't know this before. So apparently this crime scene is supposed to be an ongoing thing. Is they're going to be doing other crime scenes, and going to be investigating them and looking deeper into them. I would say my recommendation to them is do that, but be better.
Yeah, definitely.
Be a little clearer, be a little bit more concise, and stop with the 4 episodes. We got to have whatever the predetermined episode is, despite what the content is.
Right. Well, once again, bringing it back to Disney Plus, the Mandalorian season 1 got an 8-episode making of documentary, and then season 2 got one 70-minute making of. So if Disney Plus can learn, hey, maybe 8 episodes is overkill, then hopefully Netflix can learn that lesson as well and be like, we need 2 episodes, or let's just make a 2.5-hour long movie and call it a day.
And that's the thing about these kind of series is nobody is going to, if they release a 2-episode docuseries, the next one is crime scene, the Louvre or something like that. Nobody is going to be like, right. The last one was 4 episodes. Why is this not 2? I feel ripped off. It's just going to be, give me the content as it is predetermined by the content, not as predetermined by some boardroom.
Is anybody even going to remember this though? I mean, right now the streaming services are churning out so much content, which I know Martin Scorsese hates that movies have been reduced to content, but right now, streaming services are churning out so much content because we're in the middle of a pandemic and people are stuck at home and we need to be entertained, or else there's going to be riots and cars being flipped. So is anybody even going to remember this in 6 months or a year when they come out with the next one? They'll be like, oh yeah, they did that one, when this pops up in their recommended list. Be like, oh yeah, I remember that, but it's very... I'm going to forget about it by this weekend.
Well, and you look back even at some of the old episodes that we've done on Coco and Daltz and some of the things we've done.
I remember all of it. I don't know about you. I remember every single one of these episodes is just...
Okay, what was episode 73?
Christmas Chronicles.
That would be awesome if it's actually episode 73.
Actually, I know that it could very well be a Star Wars trilogy, because I remember that the Star Wars prequel trilogy was episode 66 because of Order 66. Once again, bringing it back to Star Wars.
Wow.
Order 66 to exterminate the Jedi. So it very well could have been the Disney trilogy of Star Wars movies.
So even when I look at some of our old episodes, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot we watched that. Or I remember when that came out, it was a big deal.
Yeah.
And now I've completely forgotten about it.
Right. Yeah. 6 months later, we're like, oh.
Yeah. It's the churn is unbelievable. To support your point, to back up what you just said. It's unbelievable the amount of content that's coming out right now. I mean, we're definitely in peak TV, and it's because of the pandemic and also because of all the streaming services. So,
and you know what? I'm cool with that.
Yeah, I don't mind it. I mean, some of the stuff we haven't had some. We've had some very big misses in the last little while. We haven't had a lot of huge, happy hits that we usually have. The things in terms of what we've reviewed. And this is not one of them, obviously. This is not a big hit either. But there has been some really good stuff come out. So what would you give grade-wise the crime scene docuseries? I'd give it a 4 out of 10. Wow. Yeah. That's a failing grade. I wouldn't watch it. I don't recommend watching it. Wow. What would you give it on a letter grade, Coco?
I'd give it maybe like a C-. The concept is interesting,
Yeah.
and the case is interesting. Once again, not to reduce a young woman's
Life.
to entertainment value, but all the parts were there. It just wasn't. It just didn't add up. Like, if it could have been reduced and a lot of the internet sleuthing could have been taken out, I think it could have been a lot better.
Yeah, me too. It's like the elevator pitch on that one is a tremendous story, and why wouldn't you make that? But at the same time, it's just not. It just didn't deliver on the promise, unfortunately.
All right. Got anything else to add?
No, I don't have anything to add other than my undying affection for you.
Thanks for listening, listener. You can't see me rolling my eyes, but that's what I'm doing. For another episode, I'm Not Dolls.
And I'm Not Coco.